Hi Giti, I must say thanks to Facebook that I could actually meet you. I'm really honored and privileged that you have agreed to be part of Project Bolo. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was your family background like?
I was born in 1961 and I was born in Delhi. And my family originally comes from Sindh and Multan. My father was a dropout. I mean, he came from a well to do family, but he became an alcoholic. So he was a dropout and he drank himself to death.
Which school did you go to and where?
So I was sent to convent school for lack of another option. And the convent school, the best thing of the convent school is that it taught me all about belief systems. And I had a fight with them because I said, I don't believe in your God. I don't believe in Jesus Christ, so why should I come to assembly every day and say, Our Father who art in heaven? And wear horrible headbands and, put white chalk on my shoes. And it seemed to me ridiculous.
Didn't you opt to go to another school?
I had the feeling that all schools will be the same. So my mother said, I'll send you abroad to study, I mean, she didn't have much money. So she was willing to put everything, but study, Giti, you can't drop out from school. Who drops out from school? At 15 and a half, I dropped out.
Giti, did you pursue any other form of non-formal education then?
Well, I used to read a lot. So, and I was playing table tennis. So I was training 8 to 10 hours a day. So I dropped out from that too.
From table tennis too?
I was training. I trained. I didn't stop training, but I stopped playing competition. And so people thought I was eccentric, I was mad, then I started learning languages. And I learned French, so I traveled all over Europe, West Europe. I mean, at that time, the communist bloc countries were not open. But because of table tennis, I was able to go to China, to North Korea, to Soviet Union. So I got a glimpse of all these places. So I also started to read a lot of dissident material.
During your travels in Europe, did you explore your sexuality?
See, I always say, I never came out because I was never in the closet. I mean, I knew about myself, and I think a lot of people who are genetically lesbian or gay or whatever, if you know, basically I think there is one part of your sexuality which is genetic. I'm convinced of it. Because it comes from such a deep place. You know it. So it's, even with the worst form of socialization and the worst loneliness, because when I was growing up, there was nothing. There were no peers, there were no people before us, there was no movement before us, there was nothing. There was a complete vacuum. So one had to be, one had to take on, one had to be the first to come out, which wasn't, which actually, I'm a very private person. I don't like to be in the limelight. I'm not a performer. I don't like to be on stage. That was what was actually more of a trauma for me. Not the actual act of, I felt it was my responsibility because nobody was doing it. So I felt I had to come out. I felt it was like a dharam. It was part of my own swadharma to come out.
Did you manage to talk to anyone about these feelings?
Yes, I had lots of, I had a rich life. I had a rich life. I had a rich life in terms of extremely bohemian life. Rich in the sense that they were lovers, they were friends, there was a lot of collective exchange. Well, it was very difficult to have anything here because there was so much, people were so closeted and but in Europe, it was, like I said, with both the feminist movement, with the cultural movements, because, I was involved on several different levels, learning the languages, so, you evolve a lot. So the bohemian lifestyle was also a lot of communication. There was a tremendous amount of what I would say collective communication happening within.
Where did the study of ancient language lead to?
I was doing two things. I bought myself a truck, a pickup truck. And
This was when, sorry?
this was in 85. 85. I bought like one of these second-hand pickup trucks because there was hardly anything, And I said, I want to travel India. I know Europe better than I know India, and that's ridiculous. And when I started traveling around, I realized this whole sort of view that I had been given of older Indian, and again I am saying Indian in an umbrella term, because there's so many differences. It's really ekta mein anekta. That's how I would describe it. Because there are many common threads. So I can't say it's just the principle of diversity, but there are many connecting threads. Because suddenly I was seeing in these temples, not just nadis, dual, homosexuality, everything. Sexuality with animals, autosexuality, autoerotic, sensuousness, along with very abstract motifs. So it was something which was it was like a highly worked out visual language.
What did your mother think of your travels? Was she not worried?
For my mother, she went crazy. I mean, I'd be 6 months on the road. And that time the phones didn't work. There was hardly any STD. I'm in the mountains somewhere. I'm in Kinnaur. That time you needed a pass to go there. There was no tourism to any of these places, Spiti, Kinnaur, etc. There was nobody. There were no hotels, nothing. So I traveled. I was a traveler. No, I know I'm different. I mean, and I had, and because of this difference, I had taken an extremely radical choice. And then that choice I just went on that path, finished. I mean, I think in earlier times, the wanderings, poets, poetesses, they did it in their own way. I live in a modern world, I did it in my way.
During your travels, where did you find evidence of same-sex depictions in temples?
I found it in Delhi. I found it practically in most temple sites that work with the erotic. You will find it. Because you see, the theme entire is sexual.
And GITI, what do you ascribe the presence of these sculptures depicting sexual activity in Indian temples to?
Because this fact that they feel that in the sexual experience there is something that is very, very powerful. It is a liminal act. It's not just, pleasure of the moment, but, and I can say this from experience, that there are moments when you live, when you have that with another human being, when you live a level which is so intense, where there is a complete sambhog. You see, what are the words we have? We have samakarshana, sambhog, which means, it's not just one way akarshan. When you have some akarshan, it means it's like the akarshan is neutral, and it's like when it comes together, it's like in music, when the tabla and the voice come together, when you have the sum in music. It's always at point of sangam.
You had such an intense connection at a yogini temple. When was this? And what was it about?
When I was doing my workshops in Germany, they kept saying, why don't you do a trip? Why don't you do like a, professional trip of taking us to some of these places? So I did a trip of 23 days all over Madhya Pradesh, about 3,000 kilometers of travel within India. So I organized this, and I had about 17 women coming for that journey. So I took them to a neighboring, stream, which is actually called Kali Nadi or something. It's just like a small stream, but it's very beautiful. And there was no one there, so we were alone, 7, 8 of us. Half the group didn't come. The woman that I was with didn't come. The other one came, and so before we knew it, somebody had taken off her clothes and was swimming. And then before we knew it, 7 of us were swimming in that river in the nude. That evening we took over one of the palace spaces, and it was just amazing. Somebody had brought a harp, so she played the harp. You can imagine in one of those Orcha palaces, the sunset. So she played a harp, somebody danced. So after that we went to Khajuraho. And I have this thing about the Yogini temple, and that you first have to go to the Yogini temple, then you go anywhere else. And you have to watch the sunset because it's made exactly on that axis of sun setting and moonrise. And you won't believe it, but it was, the second day it was full moon. And we had this red full moon and sun setting. I mean, it was just incredible, absolutely incredible experience. And the women went crazy. Some of the women started to dance. And so we started all to dance in that Yogini temple. Now the Yogini temple is roofless, it's next to the village, it's completely open. And after the dancing, I don't know, it's suddenly, she took my hand and it was like a kind of a lightning. I don't know what hit us. We started to make love in the temple. This open temple. She had never made love to a woman before that. And we started to make love in the temple. And I had the feeling the temple has been crying for this. Probably ever since the tradition has been destroyed. Then we went to Pachmadi and we made love on a waterfall. Again, one of the most special places where you have, a sangam, a triveni, the 3 underground streams which meet. And then you sit over there, there's a natural waterfall, water is crystal clear, sun is coming down. You make love on the rocks, bathe in the water. That's how they did it then, yeah? They had the natural elements.
Were you not scared of who is going to come, what is going to happen?
Protected in those moments is very strange. You just live it out and no one comes. And the strange thing is that once we had, started to walk back, because it's like a 10-kilometer trek. I mean, you have to walk about 10 kilometers. Once we started to come back, there were actually people who started walking down that path. But during that entire period, it's like the energy was so perfect that you were protected. It's almost like you're in this kind of absolutely magical phantom space.
Okay, retracing a few years back, I wanted to talk about when you started the first lesbian organization. What made you do it?
See, the thing is that I wanted to do it because the left was completely homophobic, the feminists were homophobic, lesbophobic. I mean, when I say homophobic, it means all forms of, I use it in a generic term. And not only were they homophobic, they were sexophobic, they were anti-desire. It was basically an anti-desire sort of tradition, mentality. And so, and there was a lot of hypocrisy. So when Ashok started Bombay Dost, and Ashok came and said, look, at least you lesbians at least write one page. And Ashok was coming out in a big way. And I felt like we had to do that. And of course there was a lot of politics. Salim was basically saying, and I want all this politics to be documented for the simple reason that this is our history. I am a truth teller, I don't care. And Salim was after him saying, oh, he's communal, he's a Hindutva guy, he's a communal guy, etc., etc., etc. And I thought, bloody bullshit. Because Ashok was getting attacked by the Shiv Sena types. I mean, the thing is, Ashok puts his foot in the mouth, which is a different story, which is fine. I mean, that's his style, but at least he does it. Did all this sort of talk about his being Hindutva, did anyone come critically out in terms of their own religion? No. Salim was justifying Shah Bano, that was not communal, but Ashok was communal. Salim was too scared to come out. So all this sort of politics and, putting a churi in Ashok's back, Siddharth was also one of the people who was doing it. It was not pleasant. Really, I felt it was not pleasant. It was dirty. It was really dirty. Because I felt we have to honor any sort of, any sort of initiative that comes from a good place, from a free place. If I have a politics of desire, it's a politics of freedom too. So when Ashok came and said, look, you have to at least write a page. And there was an Indian lesbian who was visiting from outside, and there were two local lesbians who were pretty useless, who really didn't contribute much. But anyway, we all decided that at least we should write the page. So those two didn't contribute, but this woman young lesbian who came from outside, she had passion. So we wrote this thing out and we created a PO box and we created Sakhi. That's how the Sakhi thing was created.
Which year was this?
So it was 89, because it corresponded to Bombay Dost.
And what was the organization's mission?
We wanted to, intervene as lesbians. We wanted to create a lesbian space. I mean, I think it's still there, and that, whatever our statement was, we wrote the statement out, which is in Bombay Dost. I think part of the statement was published in my book also. And also the idea was to network, to create a space that women could write to create at least some sort of a space that women could reach out to. And slowly we had a trickle of letters that came in from all kinds of small towns.
Through the post box?
Through the PO box.
How did you advertise the PO box?
Bombay Dost. Now we had Bombay Dost, we had Trikon, so we used, and then the other idea was to use the media as much as possible. So to come out as much in the media, and so each time an interview was done, each time anything was done, it would be reported about in the media, and the address would be publicized in the media. So through that, it became more and more and more.
GITI, were you the only out lesbian at that time?
Only out lesbian, and people used to hate me for that. I said, but you come out. And I was the one networking everyone. Everyone who came here was being networked through the space. Because this was one space where one could meet. This was like an adda to meet. People would hang around in the terrace. It was like a free-for-all. It was like an open house. I didn't have privacy. I mean, in this space we were the first people doing, showing films, finding films, doing something. And for a lot of it, for a lot of women travelers, it was fantastic because they had a space, to stay here. They could stay as long as they wanted and give whatever contribution they wanted.
How difficult was it to get funding?
Absolutely uphill, absolutely uphill. Because at that time, none of the... see, this is the other problem. The foundations who support feminist work were not supporting lesbian work. India was completely homophobic. India at that time wouldn't give a single grant here.
This was also the time the first ever conference was held to discuss LGBT issues.
The first ever that you had theoretical, you had historians, you had historical, you had the activists coming with their activist stories. So that's when Ashok and Suhail came. All the groups we invited. Pawan came from Calcutta. At that time he hadn't really set up his group or whatever, or maybe he just set it up. Whatever, he wrote saying he wanted to come. I said come. And we gave everybody accommodation, whatever we could afford. Women were put up here. So I had 4 people in my room, 3 people here, 3 people, it was, we just accommodated everything.
What happened? Did you manage to document the conference? What was the output?
Well, if it's not stolen, it's there somewhere in I have to look for it. Because I documented the papers, I documented everything. But then, like I said, I didn't know what was stolen afterwards and what was not stolen. I think there is still a dabba somewhere where the papers are there. Because I think I was so careful about it, because it was just, I have to look for it now.
GITI, you seem to have had not very pleasant experiences within the lesbian community.
Ashwini was from Mumbai. In fact, when she'd come, I'd given her all the books for their group there, all the Sakhi books I had given to her, I'd given to Tarshi, etc. And she took all the clippings and never gave the originals. She took all the letters and never gave the originals. And I didn't even know till I looked for it and I found it's not there. So she didn't even tell me that she hadn't replaced them. This is the level of cheating, of ethical, I mean, this is the lack of ethics anyway. Because, the robberies just didn't stop. One of the lesbians came and she took all the letters and never returned it, and this is what I meant. It was the robberies all happened from inside. And then when I questioned her and said, you took the letters away, I told you to photocopy them, you took the newspaper cuttings away. At least you leave, you make a copy, that's a normal thing. Oh no, you told me I could keep everything. Now what do? Are you going to have a fight with that person? Or when I, confronted Betu and said, Betu says, if you confront me about the robbery, I'll bloody get the mafia on you. I'll get gundas on you. And Betu bashed up Kath in front of me, and Kath was going to leave the country. She hit her in front of me, and I said, this is not on, and Kath was very upset. So these are the other issues. What do you do with the violence within the community? Because if you're not legal, there's no way you can come out with that violence.
After that, what happened? Did Sakhi break up?
That was the end of any lesbian space, because like I said, okay, then I also found out that, you see, the Sakhi computer had all the foundation names, we'd made us also a list of, prospective lesbians outside, we'd created all those networks. That entire information was on the computer. So Betu used that to get a little bit of money they started something similar. They started a guest house or whatever. So they basically robbed the concept also from the project.
Being an out lesbian, did it also impact your relationships?
Well, I think I've lived it out. And they've been fulfilling up to a point, and up to a point, no. One thing is that it was very difficult to have a relationship in India. Because I think if you are out and somebody's in the closet, it doesn't work. These are certain, axioms of relationships. It just doesn't work. And you go more and more out, and you have a lifestyle with it, and there's no lifestyle, there's no cultural space, there's no social space, there's no life space, it won't work.
Your book Sexuality was the first ever book to talk about lesbian desire in India. How difficult was it working on it?
Well, it was a very hard process, and it was a very painful process, because I started writing and I spoke to all the feminist publishers here, Kali, etc., and they kept latkawing. We're interested, we'll tell you, but they were not interested. So there was latkawing politics. And then, out of the blue, Castle called me. And they said they were interested in publishing the book. And they gave me a contract for it. So that was fantastic, because here these people were latkawing, and there they gave a contract. And but the problem with Castle is that the editor that I had, he didn't understand anything of what I was doing. So I had a complete run with the editor. So he massacred the book, because half the book has been so badly edited.
How long did the whole process of putting it together take? I mean, the publishing?
96 it was published. I think I finished it in 95. So it was really a process which was over 10 years at that point.
What is the book Sexuality about?
I don't like the title also. It wasn't my title. I actually wanted a title which was called Ecology of Desire. And they didn't want it. Because they wanted this book to sell as the first Indian lesbian book. So this was so for me it was really dealing with a mental colonization. I felt like the same thing I had resisted in school, I was experiencing in another way here, but from the only space that was available to me in the LGBT world.
What else does the book talk about?
You see, in in a monotheistic theology, what do you have? You don't have any feminine deity at all. You have an absolute male patriarch. But what you see in the temples is not just the patriarchal tradition.
Why do you say that?
What you read in the text is not just the patriarchal tradition. This is exactly what I'm trying to say. The reconstructed myth, and it's basically that Kali and Shiv have a dance contest, and Kali loses because she can't raise her leg. Hey, she's raising her leg here. She's raising her leg here. I can show you. I can show you. I'll take you to Chidambaram, and you won't see Shiv raising his leg. You'll see 108 poses of Kali raising her leg in different ways. Now, what lies? Why is this asana considered so dangerous? That is for me the question to ask. When was this myth constructed? Because the visual evidence is very different. The visual evidence that we have is extremely different. What has happened is we have lost the ability to receive the visual evidence.
GITI, what about your second book?
See, Mermaid's Trip was, I wanted to do this driving. I wanted to do a drive from Delhi to Kanyakumari and back. And I wanted to drive myself. And when I did it, I started to write the book. And the book came like a kind of a driving narrative. And it was as if part of the narrative was the actual driving, part of the narrative was the inner poiesis, part of the narrative was driving in time. So it was navigating on several levels. You know, into time, into language, so it starts to, the sort of reflectivity starts to go on many different realms. So it's neither a travelogue. I mean, it really doesn't come under any genre. Because there's everything from extreme poetry to extreme analysis.
How come it doesn't impinge on sexuality like your previous book?
Because when you integrate something so much that it becomes part and parcel of your sensibility, then it's not like
Ye
dekho type, you know.
And you never wrote fiction?
No, because I think, for me, I'm a traveler. I think life is much more exciting than fiction. I think life is, if you live life fully, you don't have to sublimate through writing fiction.
GITI, which has been your happiest moment?
There have been so many, you know, and they've been, I don't know, if you want, there's some moments which come from deep within yourself. I mean, when I'm doing my work, there's moments of sometimes absolute happiness, absolute, I mean, and you're lost in that happiness for hours and hours and hours. And sometimes you have that in human relationships. Sometimes you have that, you know, when you receive, you know, a beautiful story or something beautiful happens, or music, or, you know. So there's a whole fabric for this level of happiness. You have it when you fall in love. I mean, you know, there are moments, this is what I feel. And I say I'm a Shakt. I'm, you know, 30 years I've been looking at the Shakti traditions, and one of the forms, you know, one of the deepest forms is to know this kind of Anant. This pure bliss. And those moments take you beyond the negativity. And those are moments of such pure happiness.
Thank you so much, GITI, for sharing your life story with us. This has been immensely enlightening. Thanks.